All right, everyone. Welcome in to episode 12 of the Insta Review podcast. My name is Nicholas Hill, joined by Leon Taryan, Conor Kennedy, and Oscar Orengo. We have just went through the Thanksgiving week of NFL football, and now it's time to kind of recap where we are because we are starting to get into playoff season. There's only 6 more weeks of NFL football left, which means playoff dreams are to be made, and playoff heartbreak is sure to come. Guys, how are you doing? How are your Thanksgiving weekends?
Not too bad, not too bad. Big dub in New Orleans this past Thursday. Hopefully, we'll keep up that momentum.
Big win by the Giants. Great job by the defense in that game.
Yeah, same. Woohoo Giants. They figured it out, kind of.
Yeah, so my team is the only one that's down bad this week. Titans just injured beyond belief. I can't recall an NFL team this badly beaten down at this point in the season. Unlike the Tennessee Titans, just the fact that basically our entire weapons core, skill weapons, both running back and receiver at this point, are practice squad players. It's just not an ideal situation, but hopefully with the bye week this week, we can get some of that rectified to get back on the right track after the bye. But it is time to begin this show with our key takeaways from Week 12. Leon, I know you kind of want to comment on the game that I was just alluding to.
Right, so the Titans have now fallen out of the number 1 seed in the AFC. They are now the 3 seed after losing to the Patriots. They lost 36-13. Mac Jones gets his sixth straight win as a starter for New England. Without Derrick Henry, without Julio Jones, without A.J. Brown, Ryan Tannehill looks like an average quarterback, and I'm honestly concerned to see how this team moves forward. I know their schedule seems to be a little bit easier, but even if they do make the playoffs, I'm not optimistic about their outcomes.
Connor, what's your key takeaway for the week?
My key takeaway is that the Washington football team might be making a good comeback. As we saw last season, they started out pretty bad, but then they started picking up the pace and they ended up winning their division. I don't envision that happening with this Washington football team, especially with the Dallas Cowboys being like a really good team this past season. But I do think that they're progressing in the right direction. I think they're sitting at 5-6 right now after that dub, playing the Seahawks last night. These past 3 games, Taylor Heineke's thrown for 5 touchdowns on only 1 pick, and their defense is surprisingly becoming like a lot better without Chase Young somehow. I don't think that's a correlation necessarily, but they've been really picking things up, and their offense is looking pretty good too. So it'll be interesting to see how they do these next few weeks, seeing if they could possibly clinch the 7th seed in the NFC.
Yeah, and I kind of want to talk about the other side of that game last night. The Seattle Seahawks are an abject disaster. Their season's over at 3-8. And I do think this is the end of the line for Pete Carroll. Ever since Legion of Boom broke up in the mid, like 2015, 2016, the Seahawks just haven't been the same. I mean, they've only been able to go as far as Russell Wilson has been able to take them. And it just isn't working right now. Like, their defense isn't very good. Their offensive line has been non-existent for years at this point. Obviously, Russell Wilson's been dealing with an injury this year, and he is just not what he has been. You know, you can tell he just doesn't have the confidence in his throwing power right now with the finger injury. And really, they shouldn't have rushed him back. I think they need to shut him down for the rest of the season. There's no point in throwing him out there in a season where I just don't think you're going to get back into the playoff race at this point. And with that, I think if the Seahawks are going to stick with Russell Wilson moving forward, I think I would try to do a complete change. Get rid of Pete Carroll and try something new because, you know, Pete Carroll has been a fantastic NFL coach, but I think every coach meets their end at some point. And to me, this is the end for Pete Carroll. Oscar, what is your key takeaway?
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Saints. They're probably out of the playoff picture, but there's rumors of them finally putting Taysom Hill into a game, so we might be able to get to see him after their beatdown during Thanksgiving versus the Bills. So it'll be really interesting what they got. They got Thursday Night Football against the Cowboys. So maybe having Taysom Hill down there under center probably be an idea of what they have for next year and what they're going to put on the field, what kind of product they're going to have. So, yeah, we'll see what the Saints look like coming after this beatdown this week and what they got ready for next week.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that they weren't playing. I know he's been dealing with some injuries of his own, but still, the fact that Trevor Siemian was your first option over Taysom Hill at QB, it's really weird considering that Taysom Hill is the guy that they're paying more. The most outside of Jameis Winston to be that reserve quarterback, and maybe it's just Sean Payton trying to outsmart himself in terms of how you use Taysom Hill. But who knows? But obviously, I think you got to throw everything you can at the kitchen sink right now because you're still in a playoffs race, and you can still get into the playoffs with how bad as NFC is. Does anyone have any other comments on any of the takeaways that people have mentioned so far?
In terms of Seattle, it might be time for Russ to leave. Also, I don't know if at this stage in his career he'd be the kind of guy that would stick around for a rebuild, which I think the Seahawks should do. Also, just want to mention, I know they've been getting a lot of criticism for this, I think, over the past 24 hours. They traded 2 first-round picks for a safety. Jamal Adams, isn't that bad, but he still only has, I think, 2 interceptions this whole season, while other safeties in this league have 5. And I don't know, a safety isn't worth 2 first-round picks, especially considering the fact that Seattle would be picking 4th overall if they didn't trade away their pick to the Jets. So just some insight about that.
Yeah, the New York Jets definitely won that trade. Because obviously I think a lot of people at the time were like, okay, Seattle, you're going all in to win the Super Bowl, and you had to do what you had to do, but it didn't pan out. And to me, this is a lot what the Los Angeles Rams are doing. Trading away all those draft picks over the next couple of years to go all in now for winning a Super Bowl. Yet they didn't win a single game in November, which kind of seems to defeat the point of the strategy that the Los Angeles Rams have been doing. And that's kind of what Seattle, I felt like, did before. And after that run in 2013, it just hasn't worked. And it feels like now they're going to have to pay for it for a couple of years. In terms of where Russell Wilson could go, obviously we've talked about maybe Pittsburgh could be a spot. Would Cleveland like to make a run if they decide to give up on Baker Mayfield? What teams do you think that Russell Wilson would be a good fit on outside of Seattle?
The Giants. Let's get those receivers some yards. Daniel Jones can't really get any big stats this season, even though they won this last game. The offense did not perform any different really under Freddie Kitchens. I'd love to see that offensive line rebuilt, and to have Russell Wilson at the helm, throwing it to Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney, maybe a change to play in the Meadowlands could be great for him.
And if you get a healthy Saquon Barkley too with that would be a pretty nice offense. I'm not going to lie. I wouldn't have thought of that, but I do like the idea for us in the Meadowlands. What about you guys, Oscar and Connor?
I think what were you going to say?
Go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
All right. I think the Denver Broncos would be a really good place for Russell Wilson to be traded to. Their defense is pretty good. Bradley Chubb, fire outside linebacker. Pat Surtain, the second, he's been killing it at corner. Their defense is pretty underrated, and their offense, it's really only missing a good quarterback. Jerry Jeudy's a really good wide receiver. Their whole wideout room is pretty underrated, if you're asking me. And their first year running back, Javonte Williams, I think he has he's leading the NFL in broken tackles, and he is a beast, one of the best running backs in the league right now. So yeah, the Broncos, ever since Manning left, they've just really been missing a quarterback and a head coach. So once they get those two things together, I think Russ could cook really nicely in Denver.
I like the Giants idea. And I think it makes sense. I also think Miami's a big landing spot. I don't think Russell Wilson at this part of his career wants to be it's either win or get paid, and or even the city life. And I think think a lot of times it's been mentioned like he's married. I think he's got Ciara as her name. She's famous artist. I think he's trying to like also help support her. And there's been talks about either Miami and New York Giants back when he was in trade rumors. So I think those are still some big market teams for him.
We'll see. Playing a lot better though recently with Tua, and like Tua looks like an actual really good quarterback now. Of course, then again, you got to say, there's no real pressure now. They're not making the playoffs this year unless they run the table and a whole bunch of other stuff happens. But still, do you give Tua one more year instead of bailing on him? Of course, apparently they really wanted to bail on him this year for Deshaun Watson until all the off the field stuff came out about him. It is interesting to think about for him. Actually, here's one scenario I'll float. If Aaron Rodgers leaves Green Bay for somewhere else, what if Green Bay brings in Russell Wilson as his replacement?
I think he'd fit right in perfectly. He could run the ball. He has mobility around the pocket, and he's got that deep passing ability. I think a connection with him to Devontae Adams could develop effortlessly.
Yeah, and you have that running back support of Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, who have just come on really nicely over the course of this year, especially Dillon. Like, Dillon is a receiving and rushing back. I mean, he's such a good complementary two-way running back that, that takes a lot of pressure off a guy like Russell Wilson. Because you got to think about a large part of the last 2 years, he hasn't had Chris Carson, who has operated as kind of a security blanket in the backfield for him and has racked up a lot of receptions, a lot of receiving yards. I do think that's a part of the reason why Seattle is struggling so much in offense right now. Outside of just a shocking, 0 catches for 0 yards that DK Metcalf put up yesterday. And, it's just when you can't get the ball to your main targets, your offense is going to falter. Tyler Lockett only had 3 catches, and he hasn't had really any big games since like week 3. So I think no team is struggling to get the ball to their main weapons as much as the Seattle Seahawks are right now. And I don't know if at this point, there's any way to change it. I mean, at one point last night during the game, DK Metcalf was kind of venting to Geno Smith. And you never want to see your star receiver venting to the backup quarterback. How much of this do we think is schematics and how much of it is just team morale that's causing the Seattle issues?
I mean, it's just I really feel bad for Russell Wilson. He also lost on his 33rd birthday, which that's never good. But 3-8, it's definitely one of the more shocking stories of the season. You would never really think of Russell Wilson and the Seahawks below 500 and in a losing record. Usually we see Russell Wilson as someone who is in the MVP playoff picture in the first half of the season, and now the complete opposite is happening.
I think it's also a symptom of being a loser, like a losing team. When everybody's losing, you're going to have a lot of stress. Everybody's going to be in desperation mode. It plays a big difference than when you're winning. Like, look at the Cardinals. They're injury-ridden too, and they're fucking having an awesome season. And then you look at the Seahawks, they're not having that great of a season, but you're having all these questions. Nobody's asking, Kyler Murray really the guy? No, you're saying, hey, Russell Wilson's going to have the lead. What are we going to do with that backfield? What are we doing with our wide receivers? They're not getting the work that we wish they had. The defense is doing the job. I feel like those are all the things that you ask when you're not winning. You want to make sure you have solutions, even though you might have all the good reasons for not having the success that you should be having or that you expected. So yeah, it makes good for good news. I think, and then puts that much more pressure in the locker room.
Yeah, I agree with Oscar. What were you going to say?
Go ahead, Connor.
They definitely lost a lot of momentum after that Thursday Night Football Rams game where Russ got injured. Obviously they only won that Jacksonville game after that before Russ got back, and I don't think they've won a game since then either. Like we kind of talked about earlier. These past few years after the Legion of Boom kind of died out, the Seahawks team was basically just riding on Russell Wilson, and if Russell could cook. And when he's not 100% healthy, when he's a little rusty after missing a lot of game reps, then they fall apart. And it's over with for Pete Carroll. I think he needs to retire.
Yeah, it's very it's not great times in Seattle, that's for sure. We'll see how they respond for the rest of the season. And just to kind of go back to a comment Oscar made about the Cardinals, I felt like the Titans were similar up until the past 2 weeks. Right after Derrick Henry got hurt, they went out on Sunday Night Football, beat the Rams, come home, beat the Saints, and I know they were injury plagued too, but they were playing really, really hard. But I just think at a certain point, starting last week, they just got too injured, really, to do much of anything. And now they got to find a way to get at least some players back, and I think they'll be able to get back to winning some football games. Not necessarily meaning that they're going to go back to being title contenders, because the only way the Titans are title contenders is if Derrick Henry is somehow able to come back. But but I do think there is a point to say about how teams, depending on how the season goes, are willing to fight through the adversity. All right, Leon, you want to introduce our next story?
Big Thanksgiving win for the Las Vegas Raiders over the Dallas Cowboys in overtime. This final score is 36-33. 38.5 million viewers tuned into this game. Derek Carr was slinging the ball left and right out there. Haven't seen him this comfortable in a long time. And Hunter Renfrow looks to be his new favorite target in Vegas. 134 receiving yards. Raiders, big statement game for them because they've had a lot of turmoil off the field. But they're sticking around for this playoff run, and the AFC becomes more and more competitive. So we're going to start with Connor. Let's get your thoughts on the Raiders winning, and how do you see them going forward?
It was a good win. I'll give them that. But I still don't trust the Raiders. Not whatsoever. This Cowboys team, not to discredit their win, but they were also beat up. They were missing a couple weapons. I don't know. I still don't really see the Raiders as a playoff team. I mean, by all means, they could sneak into this playoffs in the 7th seed, but honestly, the AFC is it's so weird that there's so many teams that are 5-6, 6-5 right now that could go to the playoffs or could miss them. And I think the Raiders will be on the outside looking in once January comes.
I think they'll be a good feel-good story. Any chance the Raiders could be a feel-good story at the end of the season? They're the underdogs that make it into the playoffs with all the stuff that's gone wrong all season long. They lose their manager. They lose a star wide receiver. Hey, don't sleep on Deshaun Jackson. He had a great game, too. He had 3 receptions, went over 100 yards. He just came back off the couch. He's doing great. It's awesome. It's good to see. He might even play a bigger role now that Waller's hurt. So maybe that offense starts to play some experiments with some of their other players that are still there, and they have some success. It'll be kind of cool to see. Okay.
Well, I think there's some factors just outside of the game itself that I do want to discuss. Obviously, the 38.5 million people that watched. I mean, I believe that's the most ever for a Thanksgiving NFL game, which is remarkable considering how sports television ratings in general are going down just due to cord cutting and other factors. So the fact that NFL continues to set records just shows how popular NFL is currently in the American culture. It is the American pastime. But one thing that could derail that in the future is officiating. There were 28 combined penalties in this game for over 200 yards. It was ridiculous. It was ref ball at its most extreme. If you guys watch Urinate and Tree, he calls it ref ball. And it was mind-boggling. So many flags, flag after flag, flags that determine the outcome of this game. And I understand a lot of those were actually penalties. But at a certain point, we've got to figure out a way to kind of cap the penalties. I understand sometimes some games are going to be sloppier than others, but for a game that is so critical to the NFL schedule, this is the Cowboys Thanksgiving game. I mean, this will be probably the most watched regular season game of the season outside of maybe the Bucks and the Patriots. Because I don't remember off the top of my head how many people watched that, or the opening season game back in September between the Bucks and the Cowboys. But obviously officiating, because I remember I saw some people say that was one of the worst games I ever watched because of officiating. Well, you had some people say, oh, it was the best Thanksgiving game I've ever watched. Because to be fair, most Thanksgiving games traditionally have been kind of blowouts or low scoring, kind of like the Lions Bears, early on in the day. What was your take on that? How do we avoid being in a situation where we have 28 penalties for over 200 yards in a game? Do any of you have a comment on the officiating?
I honestly have no clue. Like, I feel like this officiating in the NFL has become like a huge problem over these past couple years, but especially like this year, it's been highlighted a lot more considering the new taunting penalties, or not necessarily new, but more heavily encouraged, I guess is the phrase. I guess being more well disciplined as a team, but also I don't know. Roger Goodell and the league argue that all these penalties are what's best for the game, but I don't see it. The NFLPA doesn't see it. Many viewers and pundits don't see it. I don't know. There needs to be a change, but I don't think it'll happen.
I mean, going back to that game, I wonder if that game was scheduled for the night instead of afternoon, if they could have maybe topped 40 million viewers. We'll never know, but that was a fun one. Definitely very surprised by that one.
I'd say on Thanksgiving, it's kind of it's the weirdness of the holiday itself. Because gotta think most people are eating their dinner around 5, so that's when everyone's together. They have a television next to them, because we were eating dinner at, I believe, like 5:36 that night. So of course this was in the middle of the Cowboys game. Of course we all had the game on. Thanksgiving's where normally the 4:30 game has more viewers than the 8 o'clock game, which is weird because most Sundays aren't like that. But because everyone's off in that day, more people are able to watch the noon game and the 4:30 game than the 8 o'clock game, because the 8 o'clock game on Thanksgiving didn't really even exist until, I believe, 2006. And of course those games were on NFL Network. Then I believe they brought it to the main networks in 2014. So it is relatively new to have those night games, because for the longest time the night games were reserved for college football. And you still had a game like Mississippi State and Ole Miss for Thursday night, which is a big rivalry game down here, especially down here in the South. And so, with the college game going on, that does eat in a little bit to the ratings of the primetime NFL game, because normally you don't have a massive college game like that opposite Thursday night football. At least, especially like what it used to be like, because there used to be big time Thursday night college football games until the NFL went to having a permanent Thursday night game every single week. So I think that's a big reason why Raiders Cowboys probably was in the right time slot at 4:30 versus 8 o'clock. And plus, too, I think having Jim Nantz and Tony Romo as well as your commentators for that versus the B team for NBC, because you had Drew Brees and you had Mike Tirico calling it. I do think that drives ratings a little bit as well. All right, any other comments on the Raiders-Cowboys game? All right, Leon, let's move on to our next one.
So Sunday was filled with a lot of happiness after the Giants won 13-7. Jalen Hurts threw 3 interceptions to Darnay Holmes, Lorenzo Carter, and Xavier McKinney. Now, interestingly enough, the Eagles' passing game was horrible, but they ran the ball all over the Giants' defense. Boston Scott eventually scored a touchdown, the lone touchdown of the Eagles, but Jalen Hurts ran the ball, was able to run around the defense. But once again, we see whenever the Giants win, they bail out the offense and Daniel Jones. Under Freddie Kitchens, the offense did not look different at all. And as a Giants fan, I'm so concerned about who's going to be our starting quarterback next season. Will we have Daniel Jones, or will it be someone else? So, Nick, we're going to start with you. Do you think the Giants could possibly get a couple more wins moving forward and catch up in the NFC playoff run with Daniel Jones or not?
I don't see it. The offense just isn't consistent enough, And this game was more about the Eagles just not being able to finish drives. Like, they had multiple chances to take the lead in this game, but Jalen Hurts played probably his worst game as a pro at 14 at 31, 129, 3 interceptions, just horrible. And it makes you question, truly, what is the long-term viability of Jalen Hurts as a starting quarterback? But back at the Giants, Daniel Jones has done nothing to really make you think of it otherwise. I mean, that's why you were saying that maybe Russell Wilson should come in. And I think this team would be a different team overnight with a healthy Russell Wilson behind center instead of Daniel Jones. I think the best the Giants are going to be able to do moving forward, just looking at the schedule, they have the Dolphins this weekend. I don't think they're going to win there. They got the Chargers. I don't think they're going to win there. Cowboys, I don't think they're going to beat them. Maybe you get the Eagles again, but, I only really see 1 or 2 more wins left on the schedule for the Giants. So 6-11, maybe 7-10 if I'm being generous. Even in the NFC, it's probably not going to be enough. Maybe an 8-9 team can get in. Probably 9-8 gets you at least a 7 seed. But I don't see the Giants being able to win 4 to 5 of these games to put themselves in that position like they're going to have to in order to make the playoffs.
Right. I think this is kind of like you could almost say like it was a pity game. It was almost a game for the Eagles to lose more than the Giants to win. Kind of like Nick said, this game was close. It was neck and neck up until like the last minute. It almost looked like they might even pull it and it would be a miracle game. Like, hey, you know what? Eagles won like the last minute. It would devastate all the Giants fans. It'd be all over the news, but that wasn't the case. Even though the Eagles lost, the Giants weren't impressive. And yeah, I don't think, looking at the NFC East, they're at the bottom of their division. There's no way that I think that they make a run for it and make it to the playoffs. That's not what I expect from them for the rest of the season at all.
I will say that Daniel Jones has looked a bit better this season. We've seen a bit more, some flashes of his talent and what he could do. If he was a consistent starting quarterback. But right now, like with the coaching staff in New York and their offensive line and the way that the team's just been playing in general this whole season, I don't see anything in their future besides definitely 4th in the NFC East. Maybe they sweep the Eagles and they do play the Bears. So there's a possibility that they can scrape out like 2 wins. But other than that, like their schedule is pretty tough. Like they're playing the Dolphins, who are on a hot streak. They're playing the Chargers, the Cowboys, and Washington, who's even better than when they played them in September. So I don't really see any hope for them to make the playoffs this season.
Yeah, they need a new quarterback. They need to start over. They need a new GM. They probably need a new head coach as well. I imagine there's going to be a lot of house cleaning this offseason in New York. At least there should be. We'll see if the Maras are willing to do it. Of course, the Giants fan base has not been very pleased with them over the past couple of years, as evidenced by their booing of him during the Michael Strahan jersey retirement ceremony this week and earlier this year with the Eli Manning retirement ceremony. Leon, what are the odds, in your opinion, that the Giants clean house from top to bottom, from GM, head coach, and new quarterback?
I think they're going to definitely fire Joe Judge without a question at the end of this season. Definitely get a new general manager in there. I think they're going to either draft someone in the 2nd or 3rd round or pick up a veteran QB to challenge Jones for the starting position. That's how I truly feel. And the one thing that I'd rather keep or build on is the Giants' defense. James Bradbury is becoming a top corner in the league. The potential of Xavier McKinney, 5 interceptions this season, 2 games where he's had 2 interceptions. and Leonard Williams in the middle of that defense at playing defensive tackle. They just look like a team that's young and hungry. And in a couple of years, if we could get the offensive line right and the offense to play more consistently, you might be looking at a team that can make a Super Bowl run. And I really hope they do very soon.
Yeah, I'd agree with Leon. I say Judge and Gettleman are gone by January for sure. Daniel Jones, like maybe, keep him around for another year. He's still on his rookie contract. So if you can beef up that offensive line, maybe you could see if they could make a run for the playoffs. And if they don't make the playoffs next year, then definitely let go of Daniel Jones. There would be no reason to keep him around after that if he can't string up a playoff run. There are some interesting veteran QB options this coming offseason. Maybe Russell Wilson, maybe Aaron Rodgers. Jimmy Garoppolo is definitely getting traded from the Niners after this season, so maybe he goes to New York. And maybe even Baker Mayfield. His situation in Cleveland right now has the potential to become a lot worse than it is right now, so maybe he goes to another team. Yeah, a lot of questions surrounding the Giants' future this coming offseason.
I don't know why, but I'd really like to see Matt Ryan on the Giants just to see how he could perform with all those receivers. If you give Matt Ryan an offensive line and time to find Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney, Darius Slayton, Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard, all these guys that the Giants invested in, I'd really love to see that.
Oh no! Out of all four of those veteran QBs you mentioned, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Ryan's the one I would by far want the least because I think he's the one who's fallen off the most. I mean, it's not like he doesn't have weapons now in Atlanta. I know Calvin Ridley hasn't been playing, but whenever he is playing, he has him. He has Kyle Pitts, he has Cordell Patterson. So he's not like bereft of talent there, and he just doesn't look like the same guy. I know they won this past week, but it was Jacksonville. Everyone beats Jacksonville. Hopefully the Titans beat Jacksonville next week.
The Bills didn't beat Jacksonville.
Yeah, but it's
I would like to see some push for the competition. Give Daniel Jones maybe a push for the starting spot. If we could get a solid veteran in there to challenge him to be the starting quarterback, why not? He might even be able to play better.
Right. So
I would
it's
say
very.
we even got the running back in there, like Saquon Barkley. I mean, he's been hurt all season long. So I think it might be even time to move on from him as well. So, yeah.
It's. Now go ahead, Connor.
And just think about how they drafted a running back second overall. I mean, obviously Saquon was a generational talent in college, but he's been injured for I don't know, pretty much almost all of his career.
Yeah.
And he's a running back. You drafted him second overall when there were a lot of questions about Eli Manning's future. He was an absolute bum for the last 3 seasons. No offense to Eli, but that's just the truth. They could have drafted Josh Allen. They could have drafted Lamar Jackson, but they drafted a running back instead. I have no clue why, but it is what it is.
I'd say with all those injuries that we've had to Saquon Barkley, the excitement is taken out of the Giants fans. We used to get really excited for Odell Beckham on Sundays. Then it used to be Saquon Barkley. And now it's just, can the defense hang in there to get us a win or even give the offense a chance to score maybe 14, 21 points?
Yeah, that's just thinking about that particular scenario. I mean, maybe you have to go to Barkley too in that scenario just to be able to get the players that you need because you need that offensive line because as great as Saquon Barkley can be when he's healthy, you can only do so much with that offensive line. And I think that you have to invest more resources into that even before you because right now, for me, if I were a Giants fan, if I had to choose between the offensive line and Saquon Barkley, I'm choosing to get a new offensive line because that'd help your passing game, and you can put a lot of running backs back there who would be effective with a great offensive line instead of what's going on right now.
To add to Nick's point, I think in some games that I've seen for the New York Giants, Saquon will break off a 40-yarder, and then after that, he won't go past the line of scrimmage. something that I've been thinking about, especially considering a somewhat similar situation with the Steelers drafting Najee Harris in the first round when their offensive line is very questionable. The value of a running back depends a lot on how well your offensive line is, how they can, create gaps so that the running backs can run through them. And when you don't have a good O-line, then what's really the value of a running back?
Yeah, so certainly this definitely will be a conversation we're definitely going to have a lot more of when it comes to the Giants because for the biggest market in this country to have two subpar football teams, I think it does hurt the NFL to a certain extent because you would like to see New York have good teams. You'd like to see a Chicago have a better team than they are just because those teams have massive fan bases. Of course, Los Angeles has decent teams, but yeah, I know we have one more game here to discuss in the key stories, Leon. So what game do you want to highlight?
How about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming back against the Indianapolis Colts? The passing game was not big this week. It was actually the running game. Leonard Fournette, 131 total yards, 100 on the ground, 31 in the air, 3 rushing touchdowns and 1 receiving touchdown, and the game winner with 28 seconds left. He looked great this game. Colts played well. They fought back. It was a great back and forth game, but eventually the Bucs did come back, and looks like they're headed in the right direction to make another run at the Super Bowl. And Oscar, we'll start with your opinion on if the Tampa Bay Bucs will make it back to the Super Bowl.
I think they can. Hell yeah, they can. Tom Brady, first reason. And the second reason is definitely their coaching. This was a great showing of getting to show hey, this is not just the Tom Brady show. He did show up. He did do a good job. Robert Gronkowski's finally in there. He's catching some balls. They're not doing as poorly as we probably expected them without Emmanuel Sanders, Antonio Brown. So it's good to see that this team is actually can be more balanced, can shift from a passing game to a running game. I think they have all the tools that they need. They just showed us that this week.
Yeah, that was a very, very gutsy one for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it was just a classic Tom Brady game. Now, I will say this. Tom Brady got a ton of help from the referees. I mean, there were several PI calls that were questionable. The Colts didn't get some calls that were questionable. And those probably determined the outcome of the game. Yeah, kind of typical Tom Brady stuff. It's kind of just an inside joke, basically, for NFL fans. Kind of getting the PI calls, willing the PI calls to go his way. But Leonard Fournette played a very good game, obviously, getting 4 touchdowns. He only had 100 yards rushing, so a lot of the damage was done interior side. But the most important thing was that rush defense holding Jonathan Taylor down for the majority of the game, forcing Carson Wentz to beat them. Now, Carson Wentz, he's getting better with this Colts offense. He's actually playing really, really well. And I know he threw the interception, but to me, that should have been a PI call. So I don't know how much I really would put that on him because I think Michael Pittman was in a position to make a play, but then he got thrown out of the way by Rockison, and that should have been called a PI, but it wasn't. And right now the Colts to me are the scariest team in the AFC South, way scarier than the Titans, and I'm so glad the Titans don't have to play them anymore. And fortunately, the Colts do have to play the Patriots and the Cardinals on their schedule. So hopefully, if they lose those games, the Titans can kind of win 1 or 2 more games to secure the division and force the Colts to play for that wild card with it being as tight as it is. So it's going to be an uphill battle for the Colts to get into the playoffs. They really needed to get that game because right now they're at 6-6. They probably need to go 5-1 the rest of the way, or 4-1 the rest of the way, because that put them at 10-7 to get in. And I think it's doable, but they're going to have to beat one of the Cardinals and Patriots. And I know they have 3 other. I know they have to play the Jaguars and the Texans each one more time, which they should be able to win those games. And I know they have another sub 500 team somewhere else in that stretch as well.
Obviously, good team win for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Leonard Fournette was the MVP of that game, 4 rushing touchdowns. The other MVP of that game for the Buccaneers were definitely the refs, wearing Brady jerseys underneath their uniforms. Definitely helped out the GOAT with some good pass interference calls or missed calls, rather. Well, actually, I didn't watch the whole game, but there was the definite ref ball that helped out the Tampa Bay Bradyneers with this win. I do question their secondary a bit still. I mean, I know that Sean Murphy-Bunting came back, but it still wasn't it's a little iffy. I mean, Carson Wentz threw 300 yards on them, but their front four is still really good. And, this is a Tom Brady team, so I would not doubt whatsoever that they go to the Super Bowl. Do I think that they're the best team in the NFC? Not really. I think that's probably either the Packers or the Cardinals, but yeah, I would not doubt whatsoever that Tom Brady and the Buccaneers could go to the Super Bowl for a second year in a row.
Damn, wow. Connor. That must hurt.
I don't know how I feel about Brady.
Yeah,
Doesn't hold
he's
back.
not a Brady fan. I'm not a Brady fan either. Although I was happy he won the game just because it's good for the Titans that the Colts lost.
On the ref stuff, I will agree. Like, there was definitely like flopping. It almost seemed like it was a strategy of the game. Even the commentators noticed it during the game, so I totally agree with you. Like, there were plays where they were saying like, "Hey, Chris Godwin's really trying to get off that contact and make that play." So yeah, for sure. But it was good to see they have like a backup plan. Everybody's got like a backup plan like that. Aaron Rodgers, he's got a little gimmick too, where he does his hard count, tries to get the defense to jump up. So maybe that's just a little trick these guys have in their back pocket whenever they get stressed out. They're not having the best game they should be having.
Yeah, it's a very interesting result for sure out of Indianapolis. Leon, I kind of misspoke there in the last game. We got one more game we actually need to discuss. The Chargers and the Broncos. And just a really shocking result there, at least to me.
Big shocker, and Patrick Surtain with 2 interceptions. Justin Herbert played well against Pittsburgh and does the complete opposite against Denver. And Denver's above 500, so the defense is playing better without Von Miller, which is a big surprise because he's been the face of that franchise for a long time. So Teddy Bridgewater is leading the offense to success with Javonte Williams on the ground, breaking tackles, breaking first contact every single time. He has Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. This is a young team led by a veteran quarterback who is reliable. I'd really love to see the Broncos make it to the playoffs. It would be redemption for Teddy Bridgewater to make the comeback as a starting quarterback in Denver. I don't know how successful they would be in the playoffs, but it's too good of a story not to root for.
Yeah, definitely a little concerning for the Chargers. I mean, they've just kind of been inconsistent this whole year. I mean, they're definitely a really talented team. Justin Herbert is a killer QB. And I feel like they have like too much talent to miss the playoffs, but their run defense is definitely suspect for sure. And Justin Herbert can be prone to, some rookie mistakes. I mean, he's still in the second year, so he isn't he's not Patrick Mahomes, but he's surely like at least a top 10 quarterback. I think he'll figure some stuff out, over the course of this season, and they'll end up probably with like an 11-6 record. I don't know if they'll win the AFC West, but I think they'll probably be in the wild card at least. And the Broncos, it's definitely interesting. Like I said earlier, their defense is pretty underrated. Pat Surtain, 2 picks, 1 return to the house for a TD. So he was a good pick. They probably should have picked a quarterback, but it is what it is. I don't know if it would be interesting if the Broncos made it to the playoffs. I honestly don't know if it would be good for their franchise in the long term. It would kind of remind me of like how the Bears made the playoffs at 8-8 last year. And that was kind of the reason why Matt Nagy is still in town. He kind of just blamed the offensive shortcomings on Trubisky and Foles, which I mean, like that's easy. They aren't that great quarterbacks in the NFL, but like Matt Nagy is still a terrible coach. But anyways, I'm going to stop on that Bears tangent. Vic Fangio is not the answer at the head coaching spot in Denver. And Teddy Bridgewater isn't the answer at QB. You know, for all the good games that he's had more bad games. And Denver fans have really seen his limitations. He's a check down artist, as we all know. So it would be really interesting to see if Denver would make the playoffs. I hope that they do at some point soon, but I don't think this is the time.
Yeah, but at this point, though, I mean, you're not going to get a good draft pick. I mean, you're going to get like a mid-tier draft pick, but you can get a good player off of. But you might as well go ahead and go all in, because I think they have a really good defense. That running back is really beginning to emerge. But you're right, Teddy Bridgewater is not leading this team to the Super Bowl. And it's just really, honestly, this game is just more aggravating about the Chargers. Why are the Chargers so inconsistent? This team has way too much talent on the offensive end to be this inconsistent. I'm starting to get worried about Justin Herbert, because one week he looks amazing. The next week he looks terrible. It's like what I said the other week. It might have been last week or the week before last. They're the AFC Falcons, and they're continuing to prove why they are the AFC Falcons. You cannot trust the Los Angeles Chargers to do anything. They're kind of like the Raiders too in that standpoint, but you cannot trust the Chargers because you just don't know what you're going to get week to week to week, which really is a shame because they have so much talent. I want to see them win the AFC West. I want to see them in the playoffs because this is a very fun team to watch when they're playing well, not when they're playing like what they did on Sunday.
That is your favorite line. I love it whenever you say that. The Chargers are the AFC Falcons. You can't trust them, but you have a quarterback who has a potential to be an MVP of the league, but you don't know if he could ever take them into a deep playoff run.
In their defense, they did not blow that lead on Sunday Night Football. That would be a classic Falcons move. But yeah, the Chargers, like I think one part that's really impacting how they've been doing somewhat poorly lately is their run defense. They need to draft a D tackle, I think, in the draft, or pick up a really good free agent D tackle in this offseason, because I think they're like dead last in the league in terms of run defense. And occasionally I question their play calling offensively. I mean, Brandon Staley is, light years ahead of Anthony Lynn in terms of being a head coach. Anthony Lynn as an offensive play caller, he wasn't good at it in Buffalo under Rex Ryan. And obviously he's in Detroit right now as the OC, and they haven't won a game. Of course, that there's not a whole lot of talent on that team, but I think Anthony Lynn has something to do with that as well. I don't know. Like in that game when they played Pittsburgh last week, like me and Nick kind of talked about this when that call on fourth down to just run it up the gut, which didn't work. Like that was one of the most obvious play calls. I think the defense could read that quite easily. But also sometimes they can really show how Justin Herbert is, a dual threat quarterback and a gunslinger, and how Austin Eckler is an absolute stud at running back. But sometimes they falter, and that's what really worries me about this team.
I think also about that game kind of shows a little bit for the Chargers, like what they look like when all things go wrong. So like on top of that, like their running game wasn't good, so they couldn't get anything going with that. So obviously they became one-dimensional. With the Broncos, I think this also shows what they look like when everything like clicks. So on top of Teddy Bridgewater, like he is a little bit of a game manager type of guy, but they had a great run game. You have all these offensive weapons in Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick, Noah Fant. You got Melvin Gordon, who's kind of a dual type of running back. You got Javonte Williams, who almost seems like a carbon copy of Melvin Gordon. So they have great tools there. And maybe if they do get an upgraded quarterback, this offense can get clicking and they can be really put on a good show. Maybe in is it the AFC East, NFC East? AFC East is where West. It's so competitive that it's hard to get out of that division anyway. They're tied. There's a 3-way tie: Chargers, Raiders, Broncos in that division, with the Chiefs on top. So it's real difficult. But I think this shows, at least for the Broncos, what they look like for the future, and maybe this gives them a good idea for next year as well.
Imagine Aaron Rodgers in Denver. Like, I know that was a big rumor in the offseason, but imagine how crazy that would be with that young receiving core.
Are we gonna restart the Rodgers to the Mile High again? Rodgers to the Mile High City.
We should have this episode where we run all these veteran free agent quarterbacks and be like, hey, what are they gonna look like in all these teams that need an upgrade at quarterback?
Basically it's gonna be the football version of the Bachelorette.
That'd be fun.
We basically just have all the quarterbacks stay all these teams, and then they show up. We just kind of choose a team for them at the end, or maybe American Idol. The fans can vote where these veteran quarterbacks can go. Also, imagine him in Denver doing his weekly Pat McAfee appearances from there. Could be a little more entertaining than those weekly press conferences he gets from Wisconsin, just because of what's available to him in Colorado. But anyway, we do have to get to our injury report of Oscar, because there are some pretty significant injuries this week.
Yeah, it was a busy week. With the Lions, we're going to start off light. We're going to start off with the Lions, DeAndre Swift, Thanksgiving football. He had a bit of a shoulder sprain. We don't expect him back, at least for 1 week. This is a good opportunity for Jamal Williams to kind of show himself up this week. Jamal Williams, former Packers running back. He's a veteran running back. He's done really well. Catches the ball, runs the ball well. So we'll see how he does in the upcoming week for the Lions. For the Vikings, lost big piece of their offense, Dalvin Cook. He tore his labrum. Be about 2 weeks. Apparently, this is an injury that he's been dealing with since through college. So with shoulder injuries, specifically labrum tears and dislocations and things like that, the more frequently it happens to you, the less severe it is. Obviously, there's a lot of as long as there's no structural damage to it, and also the faster you get to come back from it. So the first shoulder dislocation is always the worst, and then every follow-up dislocation is a little bit better. But they expect him to miss 2 weeks. Jumping in for him, Alexander Madison. We talked about him just before our Sunday night game. He does the same things. He runs the ball. He catches the ball. He's been a good fill-in game where they haven't had Dalvin Cook. And for the Panthers, this one's intense one. Christian McCaffrey lost again for the season. He's in the IR, ankle sprain. Chuba Hubbard will be has been his backup, has been filling in, has done a decent job for the Panthers. It'll be interesting to see how that dynamic works with Cam Newton, who was atrocious. But moving on, 49ers with Deebo Samuel, had a groin strain. Doesn't seem to be that serious. Could miss 1 or 2 weeks. Brandon Ayuk would be an awesome fill-in for him within that 49ers offense.
Just talking about the Panthers or Christian McCaffrey being out for the season, they're still kind of in that playoff race, but is there really any chance Carolina gets in? Because their quarterback situation right now is just terrible. Cam Newton is what we thought he was, right? He came back, had a few good weeks. It was a nice comeback story, but he looks like the Patriots' Cam Newton again. They had to throw in P.J. Walker. Is there any hope in Carolina? Because I don't think there is for the rest of the season.
I think after this game, it looked like the Panthers regretted signing him. It was a lot of hype. Second week, it was you're lost, you're done.
He was 5 of 21 in that game. He really, really struggled, and we were really all hyping this signing. This is so cool for Carolina. Cam Newton's back in the league, but I don't know what they do from here. Darnold is clearly not the answer. They definitely have to do some moving around this offseason at quarterback.
Yeah, they definitely whiffed on signing Darnold instead of just sticking to their guns and picking either Justin Fields or Mac Jones. And Mac Jones, also Matt Rule coached him in the Senior Bowl, and he had a lot of kind words to say about Mac Jones. I don't know why they picked Sam Darnold over, drafting a quarterback. I mean, I get it, kind of Franchise cornerbacks are, they're real important in terms of like building a defense, but we've seen this like multiple times. Like teams who have great defenses but don't have a good quarterback don't do anything. Like maybe at best they have like a winning record, but they're not playoff teams. They're not Super Bowl contenders. And Matt Rule, keeps talking about being a playoff team, being a Super Bowl contender, and they can't do that with the quarterback moves that they've made over the past couple of years. And I think after this season, Matt Rule is definitely going to be on the hot seat, and it's well deserved. I mean, like the first season he went 5-11. This season he'll probably end up with a losing record. I mean, all of his quarterbacks are garbage. And like, I think the writing's on the wall for Matt Rule if he doesn't bring in a good quarterback next season. I mean, there will be some options for sure. So yeah, he'll need to throw a real good Hail Mary to save his job next year, or else he's going to be coaching in college again.
Yeah, I mean, drafting a franchise quarterback at 8 makes sense, but J.C. Horn at 8 just never made any sense to me at the time. And I think part of it was he was a local guy because he went to South Carolina right down the road from Charlotte and Columbia, pretty popular in that area of the Carolinas. So I think that was part of the reason why they chose him at 8. And I think it was a mistake because I was thinking that he would fall to my Titans at like 21. So the fact he went at 8 was pretty insane to me because like the stats don't justify it from his time in South Carolina. I've watched him play couple of times in person. He was good, but I never thought he was a top 10 prospect good. And, if you look at his stats so far this year, he's had injuries. He only has 5 tackles this year because he's only played in the first 3 games because he hasn't been on the field since then. And you could have picked Justin Fields. You could have picked Mac Jones. Especially Matt Rule, considering that he was a really good offensive coach in college at Baylor and Temple. You just have to wonder what the thought process was there. And honestly, does Matt Rule even get next year? I mean, I don't know if he gets next year. And what are the odds maybe some of these college jobs start seeing appealing again to Matt Rule if things are really starting to fall apart around him in the front office at Carolina? There's a lot of factors there because I really think this team could have been a playoff team and probably should have considering how bad the NFC is this year. But they've totally screwed it up because they messed up their offseason by going with Sam Darnold, drafting J.C. Horn. Just made some really, really questionable decisions.
And just to add to that a little bit, like not only after they drafted J.C. Horn with the 8th overall pick, they traded for, I think, C.J. Henderson from the Jaguars and Stephon Gilmore. So like they really even made some more reasons why picking J.C. Horn at 8 was a bad decision.
Right, because clearly I think they realized pretty quickly, oh no, this dude isn't worth the top 10 pick that we brought him in with. So let's really go out and get another top 10 pick. That was just a top 10 pick in C.J. Henderson from a year or two ago. And I mean, it's silly. It is all silly. Not to mention too, Stephon Gilmore, another South Carolina product. So again, I understand that teams sometimes, especially in the NFL teams in the South, have to kind of placate themselves a little bit to the local college fan bases because they aren't the native team there. But you do have to make the best decisions for your franchise, and clearly Carolina has not been. Do you have any other comments on any of these injuries?
Well,
Yeah.
I think if we're writing on the Panthers, kind of writing the question like, hey, do we expect the Panthers to be very good? There's nothing in their offense that makes you excited right now with Christian McCaffrey out and Cam Newton there. DJ Moore was a little bit of a bright spot. Robbie Anderson hasn't even shown up. So it's real hard to think about them getting into the playoff pictures. And then what do they even do when they get there? I don't think they have a strong run left in them for the rest of the season.
I remember a lot of analysts were surprised that J.C. Horn was taken over Patrick Surtain. Like, Pat Surtain looks like he's going to be an elite corner in the league for the Denver defense for years to come, and everybody was shocked with that. The big injury for me, not McCaffrey, because he's usually hurt always, but Deebo Samuel, 49ers in the 6th seed, and Deebo Samuel became like the star running back for that team. And without him, a lot of that play calling is not as versatile on that team. So it's going to be I think next week's going to be tough for them.
Yeah, because he's basically become their own version of Cordell Patterson, which has been really fun to watch. So it's unfortunate that he's going to be out because those 49ers are playing really, really well. They're, to me, one of the top 5 or 10 teams at the moment, just in terms of how well they are playing. But I think losing Deebo Samuel is a bit of a crutch. I will say this. Watch out for Jawan Jennings, wide receiver from my Tennessee Volunteers, had 2 touchdowns the other day. It's really starting to emerge as a target for Jimmy Garoppolo. So maybe without Deebo Samuel, Jennings becomes someone to really watch out for on the San Francisco 49ers.
I think watch out also for Brandon Ayuk next week whenever they play Seattle. I think Garoppolo is going to go deep a lot this game.
Absolutely. So, speaking of fantasy, of all of these top performances, Oscar, who went off this week in fantasy football?
We got a couple surprise guys on the list for top 5. Leonard Fournette went off the Tampa Bay Bucks. We talked about him a little bit already. 17 rushes, 100 yards, 3 touchdowns. Got 7 catches for 31 yards and 1 touchdown. Totally blew the whole game open. Josh Allen, 23 passes for 260 yards for the Bills, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He also rushed 8 times for 43 yards. This is typical Josh Allen day for him. Joe Mixon showed up in this group for this week with 28 rushes and 165 yards and 2 touchdowns for the Bengals blowout game on Sunday. Aaron Rodgers, 28 passes, 307 yards for 2 touchdowns, and he also got to rush for 1 touchdown. This guy did this with a bad toe. Pretty cool to see Aaron Rodgers still showing up and doing this. Cordell Patterson still astounding everybody, shooting star of the season, 16 rushes for 108 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 catches for 27 yards. Those are our top guys for this week. You guys want to comment on anything on those guys before we move on? Anybody surprised you guys?
Josh Allen's a stud. Not surprising at all. I'm really happy that he started to pick up the pace after throwing 2 picks during the first half. I think that was his first red zone interception for his regular season career. But, 4 touchdowns, can't complain too much about that performance.
Yeah, Joe Mixon going off for the Bengals is, it's pretty crazy considering how pass first the Bengals have been this year. But I think it's also just an indication of just how terrible the Pittsburgh rush defense has become because of injuries and I think just kind of a lack of morale. Pittsburgh is just not, they don't have a good offense. And I think it's finally taken a toll on their on defense, plus the injuries. I think when a team's playing Pittsburgh, you're going to want to start the opposing running back.
Yeah, Nick, I'm in complete agreement with you. Joe Mixon is not someone we talk about that much on this podcast or in previous episodes, but he just keeps getting better and better in Cincinnati.
Yeah, he wasn't even used that much in the passing game in this game specifically. He's one of those guys that he could do both for you. Joe Burrow wasn't having a great day, so it's good that Joe Mixon was able to step up. In fantasy, I was really hoping Jamar Chase was going to blow up again, but that didn't work out.
Yeah, I just traded away Jamar Chase, so we'll see how that works for me long term. Trade away for Chris Godwin, so who kind of because Chris Godwin has a pretty easy playoff schedule. Well, at least in terms of fantasy playoffs, I believe they play the Jets and the Falcons during the 2 championship weeks in fantasy. So,
right. Well, I'm not trading him away at all.
I think going back to that point on the Bengals is you talked about how Joe Burrow, the passing game wasn't really working, but whenever you have a stud running back like Joe Mixon, there are a lot of weapons on this Bengals team. Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, CJ Uzama. So when the passing game is not working, the running game can work. And when the running game is not working, the passing game can work. I mean, look at what happened in Baltimore a couple weeks back.
Yeah, definitely shout out to T. Higgins, a local guy from where I'm out here in East Tennessee. Definitely heard about him since high school. So great to see him performing well in Cincinnati. Yeah, but just on the other side too, quickly while we're on them, the Pittsburgh Steelers just I think they're falling apart. I think they're in a similar situation to the Seahawks. I don't know if I'd get rid of Tomlin, but I mean, I feel like we've been saying this all year. Roethlisberger has to go. He's done. He is just no longer a viable starting quarterback in the NFL. And I'll be curious to see who they go out and get for quarterback. Do you draft someone? Do you sign someone? I think you're going to have to sign someone before drafting, honestly, if you intend to be competitive next season.
I do like what they have around them, though. Chase Claypool makes some great catches this season. Deontay Johnson. So there's a lot of potential there in that offense with Najee Harris totaling over 1,000 scrimmage yards. Yeah, but they need a new quarterback, definitely.
Yeah. So with all this in mind, Oscar, who are your waiver wire picks?
Well, waiver wire picks. We got Kenny Galladay, wide receiver of the New York Giants. He's one of their better wide receivers. He's been active. Jamal Williams with DeAndre Swift getting hurt. He'll be a good start. For kickers, Michael Basley. He's been more of a consistent kicker. He's with the Colts the last couple of weeks. He might be a good fill-in streamer for this week. Tua Tagovailoa with the Miami Dolphins after this outing. He's definitely one of those guys you should look in for a streamer quarterback. And Marcus Valdez-Scantling had a great game with the Packers this weekend. Definitely some guys you should be looking into to add in your team if you're looking for some reinforcements.
Yeah, the staff pick here, of course, ever since Derrick Henry went down, it's been a big question who's going to emerge as the main running back in Tennessee in his absence. And I think the answer is clearly Dontrell Hilliard. I mean, he did have a fumble, but he ran for well over 100 yards the other day, had a 68-yard touchdown. He is really, really quick. He's a rookie out of Tulane, was on our practice squad, but is emerging as a good weapon. And I hope even with Derrick Henry coming back one of these days, whether it's playoffs or next season, Hilliard will still be that running back too, a change of pace, receiving back. But for the rest of the season, he's a guy that you're going to want in your lineups, I think, as a flex. Or maybe even an RB2 if you're really desperate, because last time I checked, only 23% of fantasy leagues had him even rostered. So I think that's someone who's really going to go for the roof this week. So if you can pick him up to shore up your running back depth. But thank you, Oscar, for the injury and fantasy reports. Now, folks, it is time to make some money with Connor. Let's talk about some of your sports betting lines you are really keen on for week 13.
All right. So, as usual, I got 4 week 13 matchups. And I'm going to start with the San Francisco 49ers versus the Seattle Seahawks. The Niners are favored by 3 points, and the over-under is 45.5. Now, San Fran is on a hot streak at the moment with their great run game under a receiving core, and their defense is improving as well. Seattle, we talked about them earlier. There's not much to say. Pete Carroll's probably going to be gone after this year. Russ might be traded as well. I'm going to pick the Niners to win and cover easily. This next matchup, it's going to be the Las Vegas Raiders versus the Washington professional football team. The Raiders are favored by 2.5 points, and the over-under is 49.5. Now, the Raiders broke their 3-game losing streak on Thanksgiving in an overtime thriller in Jerry World, beating the Cowboys with a game-winning field goal. And they looked pretty good in that game. Derek Carr throwing for a touchdown. And the Washington football team, on the other hand, has been on a winning streak, and they look like a much better team than they did a couple months ago. I said this earlier on today in the podcast. I don't trust the Raiders. I'll just say that, leave it at that. And I believe in Washington to continue to play great football for the rest of the season. So I'm going to pick the Washington football team to win. Hail to the Washington football team. And this next matchup, it's going to be the New York Giants versus the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins are favored by 5 points, and the over-under is 40.5. Now, the Giants won big against the Eagles this past Sunday, but that doesn't fool me. They still suck. And if Mike Glennon starts on Sunday, they will lose. Something that we didn't touch on earlier, I think Daniel Jones is injured. I don't know the timetable of it. So they might start Mike Glennon. They did pick up Jake Fromm from the Bills practice squad. Georgia quarterback. He's not very good either. Meanwhile, the Dolphins, after going 1-7, they've started playing up to their potential. and they've improved to 5-7 with their defense stepping up. Jalen Waddle looking like one of the best wide receivers of the draft class of 2021. And Tua actually looks like an NFL starting quarterback. Now, I'm going to pick the Dolphins to win and cover this game. Sorry, Leon.
I'm gonna be there. I need a win in my first football game. Hopefully, Kenny Golladay could have one good game this season. He hasn't even had a 100-yard receiving game this season at all.
Oh.
So let's hope Oscar's waiver wire pick is correct. And I just want another win. Dolphins have won 4 straight, so it's gonna be a fun matchup. And weather's gonna be nice there. It's cold here in New York.
Well, I never root for the Dolphins unless they're playing the Patriots. So hopefully they don't win, but yeah, that's just how I think that this game will end up. This last matchup, if you need some money, bet on this game. It's going to be the Minnesota Vikings versus the Detroit Lions. The Vikings are favored by 7.5 points, and the over-under is 46.5. Now, Minnesota lost on Sunday in San Fran, but we all know that Kirk Cousins' team records are usually around 500, so they'll probably scrape out a win this week. He'll probably throw for like 400 yards or something. It also helps that they're playing the worst team in the NFL in the Detroit Lions. Now that I'm saying this, the Lions will probably scrape out a win. But from what I can tell, I think the Vikings will win and cover. Not much else to say. And those are my 4 Week 13 matchups.
Yeah, to me, the Lions are like one of the scariest teams to bet on because it feels like they're going to win a game somewhere. But it's really hard to say where because you don't know when they're going to show up. Jared Goff's going to have his one magical, good game, and they're going to win. So would you just stay away from the Lions? Because I'm going to personally stay away from the Lions because I don't know when their one good game's going to be.
You know what's really interesting about it? The Lions in their past 3 matchups have given up less than 20 points. Their defense actually hasn't played bad. If you had a different quarterback on Thanksgiving, I think they would have won that game.
I know y'all aren't as much college football, but the Lions are basically the NFL version of Nebraska. Okay, basically just for context, Nebraska was 3-9 this year. They literally every single one of their 9 losses was by a possession or less. It was the most insane season I've ever seen. It was a decent team that couldn't win a single close game. And to me, that's what the Detroit Lions are. So I don't know. I'm just gonna avoid them because I did personally bet. We got a question here. Got a PPR trade to review here from Harry Wolf. All right, Harry, send us in the trade and we'll tell you whether or not to do it. Because I've had to make a decision earlier on a trade because I know in our fantasy league we had trade deadline this week. So I feel like a lot of other leagues have it too. So let's see if he sends in the trade here for us and we'll react to it. But personally, I'm still going to stay away from the Lions. Are there any other teams that y'all stay away from in terms of betting? All right, so his team right now is A.J. Dillon, Javonte Williams, Leonard Fournette, Alexander Madison, Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, Travis Kelce, and Jalen Waddle. So he got offered Fournette for Robinson and Carter, or Robinson and Damian Harris. Okay?
Your team's stacked, man. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, your team's insane. That seems like a championship winning team to me. Because I'm trying to think Madison Diggs, because you have really good receivers. You got obviously the best tight end. You've got a lot of depth at running back. And I mean, Damon.
Who's your QB?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, who is your QB? All right, but he has a team in the league. All right, so I guess his main adversary here. Let's see who's going up against.
Josh Allen, Najee, Patterson, Kittle, Tyree. Oh, okay.
And he has Kylan Rogers, and obviously, is it a 2 QB league? It might be a 2 QB league. And obviously, Kyler has been hurt for the last couple of weeks. Rogers has been in and out with COVID, and has a COVID toe right now. So, yeah. we don't know how good he's going week to week. But okay, no, it's a not to quarterback league. Yeah, well, he definitely got to have quarterback depth. So I personally wouldn't make that trade, unless you just really want to improve running back depth. But to me, I already think you got the best running backs, and to me, that's just trading for running backs to put on your bench. Which at this point in the year, the only trades I would make, because you make trades like that early on in the year, just to like get you for the bye weeks. But right now, the trades to me are setting you up for the playoffs. So I wouldn't make those trades. Would anyone make that trade?
I agree with you.
No, he has Leonard Fournette, and next week I think they play the Atlanta Falcons. He might have another big game there.
Plus, just anyone listening to this, if you can get your hands on any Buck skill players for the fantasy playoffs, you absolutely should, because the Bucks during weeks 15, 16, and 17, okay, they play. First for week 15, they play the Saints, so that'll be a somewhat tough game. But if you get past that first round, or if you had a first round bye, week 16 is Carolina. Week 17 is the New York Jets. Which are both very favorable matchups for the Buccaneers and any of their skill players. And that's why I personally traded for Chris Godwin today, because I got offered that, looked into that, and I decided that made the most sense because I'm all in. I'm trying to win a championship this year, so yeah. So thank you for the questions, and thank you for watching us, Harry. That's we always are here to answer questions. We love to discuss some fantasy football on this show. All right, so I think it's time to go ahead and start wrapping this thing up with our Player of the Week segment. We'll start with you, Leon. Who was your Player of the Week?
Had to go with the running back of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Leonard Fournette, 4 total touchdowns, great performance all around. Over 100 scrimmage yards. Looking forward to him playing next week against the Falcons.
Oscar, who's your Player of the Week?
Mine was Cordero Patterson. He was hurt with an ankle injury last week, and the Falcons looked terrible, atrocious. He's definitely the key to this offense. He rushed 16 rushes for 180 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did a lot of the work here. He was their offense in this game. It was good to see that at least they have something positive in that offense.
Connor, who is your Player of the Week?
So I talked about him a little earlier in this podcast, but I'm going to go with Broncos cornerback Patrick Surtain II. 2 interceptions in the fourth quarter, 1 return for a touchdown. The Broncos absolutely killed it with that pick. And this defense is going to be dangerous for quite some time.
Yeah, my Player of the Week, Joe Mixon, 28 carries, 165, 2 touchdowns in that 41-10 rout of Pittsburgh. If Cincinnati can be balanced like that, that's a dangerous team. That's a team that could potentially come back, win the AFC North, or at least get one of those wild card spots. And I still don't think they have the experience to make a deep playoff run, but the future is very bright in Cincinnati, something that we haven't been able to say in a very long time. And maybe they can finally win some playoff games and end the suffering of the Bengal faithful. So, Leon, I know you want to share picks that we made off camera for Cowboys Saints this Thursday night. Saints very injured. The Cowboys coming off a heartbreaking Thanksgiving loss. What do we think is going to happen for Dallas, New Orleans?
So even before the big news of Mike McCarthy testing positive for COVID and multiple players, I had the Cowboys winning 38-10, Nick 31-17, Connor 28-14, and Oscar 31-14. Do we want to change these picks due to some inactive players, or we're going to keep it?
I'll just keep it. If you look at the teams that haven't had coaches due to COVID, I don't think it's really changed much of anything. I mean, these are professionals. I feel like it's much more important in college because the college players feed off so much more of their coaches versus professional players. So I think the Cowboys should still come in and take care of business against a very injured New Orleans team.
Right. I'm surprised with the way football is with all their headsets and all that stuff. They haven't figured out a way to keep you involved as a coach being COVID positive, unless you're really, really sick.
Yeah, like why can't they just have like their own private suite or something? Because I know, like, for example, during the Atlanta Braves World Series championship celebration at Truist Park, which is the Braves baseball stadium, the Braves GM literally had COVID. So they literally had him in his own private suite by himself. And he was talking to the crowd through, a microphone. So, like, why couldn't a coach do that,
Yo, they should create like a Mike McCarthy hologram, like Tupac at Coachella, like years ago. That'd be sick.
Yeah,
They
that
should
would be
out in a bubble, like a big giant bubble.
like a hamster. Like, it's basically like, I mean, I just want to see Mike McCarthy rolling around on the sidelines.
Exactly.
Yeah, he may make some better coaching decisions if he's upside down. Who knows? He needs some blood to rush to his brain. Yeah. So I do want to bring up a big announcement though before we close. Leon and I, if you don't know what the app Colorcast is, the best way for me to describe it basically is Twitter Spaces, but reacting and commentating to a game. So, for example, on the TV in my room here, I've got the Warriors and the Suns on in the background here. So, like, basically, the whole idea is Leon and I are just sitting here kind of reacting to the Suns Warriors game, for example. And we're talking about that. We're talking about just the NBA as a whole, talking about, whatever comes to mind. So we're going to do that for Cowboys and Saints for Thursday night. We'll get on around 8 p.m. Eastern and just hang out during the Cowboys and Saints game. It's going to be a good time. Definitely share our broadcast. Come join us because we are looking to do more of that on Colorcast. This is going to be our debut together. So it's going to be a fun time. I'm looking forward to it. Do you have anything to say, Leon?
Looking forward to it as well. And just to finish off the podcast, since we were talking about hypothetical picks for a quarterback, I got one that's going to shock everybody. What if Tom Brady went to the Detroit Lions? What would happen?
They still would suck.
I mean, obviously Tom Brady went to school at Michigan, obviously. Shout out to any Wolverines in the audience getting that big W over Ohio State. But the only wins in the state of Michigan are going to come from the Wolverines and the Michigan State Spartans, not from the Detroit Lions. I mean, that would just be Tom Brady's only going to go somewhere where there's a clear Super Bowl roster. And that's
the wide receivers. They still need the wide receivers in Detroit.
Yeah, they got like fifth rounders and like Burger King employees in that wide receiver room.
Yeah, plumbers and electricians. But like, here's my experiment. Can Tom Brady's luck overrule the misfortunes of the Detroit Lions?
I really hope that like if he like came back to play in Michigan, that he like regresses to the bum that he was when he was the Michigan starting quarterback. Man, like if you look at his like pro day, he had like historically one of the worst pro days out of any quarterback in history in the NFL. Just wanted to drop that in there. Yeah,
I am so interested in hearing how you will feel after the Bucs and Bills game in a couple of weeks if Tom Brady wins. I think that'll be worse than your reaction for the Jaguars and Bills game.
Honestly, I mean, we lost to the Jaguars, so like I don't think they could let me down anymore.
Right. So I feel about the Titans right now. Just without Derrick Henry, I can't really expect anything.
I mean, like I'm used to Tom Brady owning my team. Like he did that for like 20 years. So, it wouldn't be anything new.
Yeah. Your entire childhood.
Yeah, that's why I didn't get into football until like a year or two ago, man. Like there was no point in watching the Bills games because Tom Brady was just gonna beat us. Yeah. Yeah, dude. That's why I hate Tom Brady. Well, no, there's other reasons too, but
to be fair, there really was no reason to get into Titans football until like 5 years ago either. I mean, between 2008 and 2017, they never made the playoffs, and we had to go for the whole Jake Locker era. That was mind numbing.
Actually, a serious question though. Speaking of Tom Brady and the big hypothetical question, do you think after this season, whether he wins a Super Bowl or doesn't get it, you guys think he'll retire or no?
Nah.
Depends if he gets a big time injury or not. If he survives, if he goes for the rest of the season without injury, he's still gonna go. He hasn't fallen off to me physically like that, like a Roethlisberger, and there might be other reasons why that's happening. I can only speculate, but it doesn't feel like he's ready to retire. It feels like he's got 1 or 2 more years at least. Because I feel like he's the type of guy who's going to say, all right, before the year, I'm retiring this year, and it's going to go out and have a big farewell tour.
He'll retire when he...
Right. That's a good point. It's a good marketing tool. But I think as long as there's a team that's willing to keep investing in him and build around him, I think he'll have an opportunity to go. And because he's that kind of guy who's like, hey, I want to play forever, you might have somebody who's still willing to throw money at him until he can't play forever anymore.
Go ahead.
In the offseason, the Tampa Bay Bucks GM said verbatim pretty much that if Tom Brady's still playing when he's 50, he'll still pay him. But personally, I think when Tom Brady runs out of HGH is when he retires.
Right. I mean, to me, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Jordy Howe or Gordon Howe, depending on what you call him. He is a famous hockey player from 1946 to 1980 with the Detroit Red Wings and some other teams towards the end of his career. And of course, hockey is a very physical sport, but he managed to play from the age of 18 to the age of 52. So could Tom Brady make it to 50? How? I mean,
he have all his teeth by the time he retired.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's so rich you can get.
Nah, he won't. I don't think he'll make it to 50, but I still see him having some significant impact until he retires. And you can't count him out in the playoffs, as you said, Nick.
Yeah,
you can never count him out until he's knocked out. Of course, I think the one weakness of the Bucks is their secondary, and I'm curious to see if any teams are going to be able to take advantage of that. All right, so before we wrap up, are there any last questions or points anyone wants to make?
Going back to the Bucks, I would say their defense is a lot weaker this year compared to last year. And I think if it were them and the Packers in the NFC Championship, I'd take Green Bay this year.
I would agree. Right now, I've been saying it all year. I have a feeling with the Packers, and to me, they're really starting to play their best football. I really like the Packers, and the team I'm most worried about is the Rams. I still think they're going to make the playoffs, but they're very worse. And Matthew Stafford's starting to look like he's in Detroit again, which is not a good sign. But anyway, thank you so much to everyone for watching the Interview podcast. This has been episode 12. Of course, stick around next Tuesday evening. We're going to recap week 13. It's sure to be another crazy week of NFL football. So for Oscar Orengo, Conor Kennedy, and Leon Taryan, I'm Nicholas Hill. Thank you to all of our audience for watching the Interview podcast. We will see you next week.